show of hands, like who's here? Are you student outside of NFB marketing people? Who's sitting here? Are you mostly students? Yeah, yeah, and mostly from OCAD or from other schools as well? Yeah. Okay, great. Because we're going to try to talk, obviously in this discussion about some things that could affect you. You have professors here too? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm Roddy McManus. I'm executive producer of the National Film Board. And a lot of those hot housers have gone on to other things since we did that. I know Carrie's now working for DHX as a storyboard artist, and David actually, the 3D and the 3D film, he's doing a filmmaker assistance program film right in our studio. We already stole him for another film as well. So I just want to put a plug in for Hot House, rather than you asking questions later on. That if you go on the website now, the NFB website, all the information is there. We'll be doing our next call around January for this year. So, but if you can put your name in now, and we'll be able to email you. So I thought we could go through and everybody introduce who you are, and then I'll kind of set up what we're going to talk about. So,
sure. Hi, I'm Ben McEvoy. I'm the co-founder of TAAFI, the Toronto Animation Arts Festival International, which we just launched last year. I'm also an animation interactive producer for a studio called Optics Digital, former animator and teacher at Seneca.
And I am Mark Jones. I work at Seneca as the chair of the School of Creative Arts and Animation. I'm also on the board of TAAFI, and as you can tell, the mandatory wardrobe for TAAFI is part of
I'm Heather Walker, and I'm executive producer of intellectual property development and production for Yowza Digital.
I'm Frank Falcone. I'm also a former animator, founder and president of Guru Studio. We do entertainment for commercial television and beyond. We do animated, character-driven narratives.
My name is Tony Tarantini. I'm from Sheridan College, now a full-time professor, but I was working in the industry for quite a few years, actually with a couple of people on this panel for a while, which I haven't seen for a while. It's nice. I'm also the coordinator for Industry Day, which is an event that we organize for the students to meet industry people daily.
I'm Peter Hudeki, currently faculty in animation at Durham College in Montreal. Prior to that, about
Yeah, sorry about that, Peter.
prior to that,
That's for all your students
like
don't
this. About 30 years at Nelvana and various other animation studios here and abroad and other planets.
I'm Philippe Blanchard. I teach in drawing and painting and creative media here at OCAD University, but I mostly teach animation courses. I work in the animation field in Toronto, mostly on a studio called Headgear Animation.
Well, there's so many great studios in Toronto, and obviously world-class animation that comes out of the city and out of Ontario. And the great reasons for that is you've got this great synergy between great schools, and those schools are represented here in some of those studios. But this kind of discussion that we're having came about actually with Frank when we were in Annecy and we were at the Irish Cocktail, and we had a couple of Irish cocktails. And we started to talk about, even with the synergy between great schools and great studios, other countries right now are taking auteur filmmakers and putting them forward to make feature films and to make television series and interactive and new media. And it's something that I know when I was in the studio, I wanted to push forward, and I think you guys all on the studio side share a passion there. So part of the discussion we want to have is how can we put that notion forward a little bit? And obviously that won't be done tonight, but I think that's something that Ben, you want to look at too. So just want to kind of go through, maybe start with you, Heather, talking about what you were bringing up. What's an emerging filmmaker, and what role, where do they go? You know, outside of the film board where you can come and you can pitch a film, you can make your own film. Is there a place really for an auteur filmmaker in your studio?
There definitely is in our studio, but beyond if there's a place or not, the question for me really is what is an emerging filmmaker? What is an emerging animation talent? Is it just a student that's graduating? Or is it somebody who's perhaps worked in the industry for many, many years and finally has the opportunity to really suddenly, for whatever reason, explore their own feel, look, art, beyond, frankly, the factory that maybe series animation can be. So I think for me, I'd like to start at what is emerging talent? What does that mean?
Can I weigh in?
Yeah.
I think one of the things we discussed when we were in ANSU is that Canada produces no lack of animation talent in terms of production line talent. So we're really good producers of talent. We know how to organize things. We have a tax credit system that's very supportive of the industry. So we have lots of people busily working in their hamster cages making animation. For lots of people, often US producers or people from other countries. We make a bit of our own content. It's starting to get much better than it was 10 years ago. It was unwatchable maybe 10 years ago. It was what I called filler. But now it's beginning to emerge as something that you actually might want to watch. You make a choice to watch it. You don't just endure it. And so I think what the discussion is about is, we'd love in Canada to encourage people to have a thought and an idea and an intent to be a director or to create a project and to bring something forward that we can share with necessarily the whole world, because Canada's a small country. So I guess part of what we want to sort of debate on this panel is how do we get that discussion and maybe at some point return to the audience and say, what are your thoughts on how do you get to be an animation director? A lot of you are kind of young, but it should start there, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's great. Again, I think maybe we can kick this over to some of the universities now. Definitely, as Frank was saying, if you're here and you're a student, you're learning a craft, but if you want to be a filmmaker, now, is there a path, for example, in OCAD or in Sheridan or Seneca that allows you to maybe follow that as a current, so that when you come out of that program, you may be driven from a strong narrative perspective? Let's keep it to narrative right now. I think for experimental film purposes, we'll take care of that for now. But I think it's still what makes great filmmaking or a great storytelling. So what do you see from the schools? Maybe we can start with you, Mark. Yeah, or Tony.
No, that's fine, Mark. Go ahead.
There's a number of points that you can come at this question. Storytelling is something that I would say every school that works in this area teaches really well. I'd say all of us recognize the importance of story and foundational art skills as the pathway to what you might call an auteur or as being a film director in some way. But it's interesting to me how when a student goes through many different programs that teach animation or any kind of filmmaking, that inevitably certain economic concerns start to play into the question. What I mean by that is that we're noticing in our students that when we present opportunities to actually develop that independent filmmaker position, in other words, if they come to us with a film idea and they say, we want to actually make this, they often have that idea at the same point that they're starting to get close to graduation, that they're beginning to think about, I'm going to have OSAP loans pay off pretty soon. The financial question starts to become more of an issue for them, and oftentimes what can happen is that given the choice between pursuing that independent vision and looking for a job in the industry, we end up losing some really good potential independent filmmakers just simply because of the economic necessity of them having to survive financially afterwards. And I think that, one of the things I admire about Sheridan, quite frankly, is that, in the 4 years that they have, they managed to carve out a space for that. And I think that's great. And I think that a lot of the other schools need to do the same sort of thing, because we cannot assume that when someone graduates from any kind of animation program that they're going to be in the pure financial position to actually move into an independent filmmaking kind of craft. And so part of our responsibility as public institutions, and actually Hot House is a great example of this, is to actually create spaces for emerging talent to find that voice.
That's a great point, and I'm on the PAC at Sheridan, and I know a few years ago when they went to a degree program, the final year film was under a lot of pressure to be removed because a lot of the big studios that do, a lot of the hiring didn't really care for the narrative. They didn't really want to hear the stories out of Canada. They just wanted people that could move things well and pose well. So for them, it's like, I don't care about your storytelling ability. I just want someone who can do what I tell them to do. So there was a lot of pressure, and so we really did work hard to ensure that opportunity remained for the school, because you may never get that chance again, financial considerations being as they are, or you may not find that opportunity for many years later. So at least you get a kick at the can when you're in school. And that opportunity here at OCAD, I hope exists, or it's the school is more of a liberal arts school, so you probably have an opportunity if you're in printmaking to do a film if you want. I understand it's a different sort of system, but I think the earlier you can put your hand towards making a film, even if you don't revisit that again for 5, 10, 20, 40 years, you've at least done it, and you know the A to B of getting a film together and putting it in front of an audience and what your reaction was, right?
I've seen head
It's all
shaking.
very, I love it. It's true. I understand that. I know that everybody would love to have the chance to make the film, but from what I see, from my perspective, is I see people coming in, their perception of what the industry means and what it is, from grade 11, grade 12, from that world, have no idea what the creative process. Don't see this kind of thing, are not aware of it, might catch it on YouTube or some of the other web-based animation things, but it'll be more closer to the broadcast model that we see of animation, short, funny, quick. You won't think of things, and very often I'll explain a technique to somebody, and they'll go, "Wow, that's really crazy! I've never seen that. What is that?" That's also animation,
Right.
Because there's no exposure, there's no awareness. So people coming in and saying, "I can't wait to get in here so I can work on Backyard Against Two, and I can work at DreamWorks." So the challenge that it becomes a little bit more of shifting away from what the schools are doing. If anything, even just an awareness that this art form is much greater than what they came there for was, this is a cool job. I can work on a television series and have a great career. They don't even think of the creative part.
But I think for me, that's where we go back to not just the question of then what is emerging talent, but how do we support talent, both as schools and as industry, because I agree with all of the points that you're all making, that the schools aren't doing a terrible job given the huge scope of art knowledge that they have to impart in a short period of time. And I also think the studios aren't doing a bad job considering they have zero support, which is a whole other beef of mine, from the government. Why is the government not here? Why is the OMDC not here as part of this discussion? So considering we have zero support, finding ways we can work together also with the schools, with the NFB, to support the talent that is emerging, whether it's an idea you had in school and now, as Frank said, it's 10 years later and you might finally have the financial wherewithal to do it and the knowledge to do it, and maybe even the context that support the ability to get it done.
You got
Sure, I'll jump in. I appreciate what Frank said. Actually, thank God for him and friends that were on that pack that said, the film, the fourth year film is important, because the faculty were pulling for that. And at Sheridan, most of the faculty are industry people that have gone full time, as I did. By the way, I'm an OCAD grad from 1985. And I went into animation coming from fine arts and design. I came back from my degree so I could get full time at Sheridan, and I went to get my master's, just a little thing. It's never too late to go study. But we don't have that problem, I think, of laying the groundwork, of laying the foundation. Our grads, I believe, are definitely filmmakers. I like to call them generalized specialists, because they understand the whole general scope of making an independent film, and storytelling is our core. But they actually specialize in something, hopefully, something that they can really be proud of. I think they get a chance in third year to do a group film, so that's amazing. They do a group film throughout the year from September to April. They're stuck together, they got no choice. And then in fourth year, they make their independent film, and Frank comes every year, so he knows the quality. We have some pretty good films coming out of that. But I think the issue for us is just, as also some of people said on the panel here, is that they need to go out and pay their bills. So it doesn't matter whether that foundation is there. The reality still is, you have to go out there and pay your bills. And then if you want to make a film, where do you get the money from? It's a perfect example of somebody actually made it happen that started the first year that Hot House was started, which is Jonathan Ink. He has his film, Requiem, on Monday. Is it just next week, just play? And he made it happen because he hustled. And he hustled for grants, and he hustled for anything and everything he could do. And he worked in the industry a little bit to make some money to support his independent, I guess, power to express himself, that artistic voice that we all talk about. So he's making it happen, but I know talking to him, it's a real struggle. So for us, it's more about, okay, so if somebody does have an idea, if somebody does want to make a film, and Ben was an old alumni of mine. My first year I taught at Sheridan, he was my student, and I know that him and his friends and people like him still would love to be able to maybe make a film. And where do they get it? So I think the NFB offers a great opportunity. I wish there was more of it, and they would keep supporting him even in their later years. I mean, we have friends in the industry that are. I had a friend, Willie Ashworth, that was making a short film, I think for 25 years. And finally, like 3 years ago, he finally showed it at a TAAFI meeting. You know Willie?
Yeah.
Right? Did you see his film? Did he finish?
No, I'm glad.
He finished. And he was animating in a traditional animation. It's amazing. So that, I think that willingness, that drive, that want to express yourself as your own project, that like a fine artist would want to, is there with animation artists. We're no different than any other artist. So it's a matter of support, and I think there's room for the NFB to provide forums. I don't know exactly how it works, but I understand that a lot of the facilities are in Montreal. So that in itself, for us, for our students, presents a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it's limiting.
So to have facilities here in Toronto that would accommodate and promote and provide forums like this, and provide even networking, that's essentially what you need. They'll do the work themselves. They just
Yeah, let me just respond to that, because I've been at the NFB for 15 months, and I recognize right away there's been a tremendous democratization of not only tools to create animation, but also that you can share work, fast network. So we've got a couple of examples that I can give that. Yeah, time was when everything was in Montreal, but Mark and I are working on a project right now with and that's a model I'd like to talk about tonight at some point as well, where with Chris Landreth, where yes, some of the work was being done in Montreal, but the majority of the work was being done here. We're doing 3 films in Vancouver. We've got 2 films going on right now in Calgary. So we have 2 films that are being produced on the East Coast in Halifax. So we're everywhere. We're right across the country. But at the same time, what I'm trying to do is take that studio that we have and make it 21st century, in that we can leverage our expertise. We can leverage our kit, our gear as well. We're working with Canary right now to do remote rendering for that film. We could talk, and it could be something we could be working with your school too. I've been talking to the guys over Grayden about cake, for example, which was something we could be looking at with you guys. So there's a lot of ways that we want to get involved on that level as well. Yeah, go ahead.
There's something that I just want to go back
And
to.
Ben,
Sorry.
sorry.
So much to say. I drank so much coffee earlier.
I don't have a.
I know.
No, I just want to go back to something that Heather said that I think was an important consideration from a teaching perspective, and as well, Frank, something you brought up, and that is, you said there's a multiple disciplines to learn when it comes to the art form of animation. And I've had the good fortune to work with some. I know what your animation ability is amazing, but that doesn't come in 3 years. And production, ability to understand properties and be creative and manager at the same time. That does not come in 3 years. Learning Maya doesn't happen in 3 years. And there's so many storyboarding, all the disciplines that make for really well-honed, trained animator, filmmaker. It just doesn't happen. 3 years is not actually 3 years. It's only, if you squished all the months together, you'd be in Vancouver and you'd have it all happen in 21 months and a lot of people with no ice. But the challenge is you've got a compressed amount of time. You've got a lot of very strong rules about what can and cannot be taught that need to be approved, and any change is kind of like making a quick left in an aircraft carrier. It just doesn't happen that quickly.
Sounds like production. Sorry.
Yeah, but if I want something, you will get it for me.
Okay.
So, how do you try and teach this fantastic skill, this fantastic art form, which there are a million ways to go from art direction to sound production to all of that, in a way that, as far as everybody knows, is going to get me a job, which means getting into broadcast and working for a studio that does that. Now, let's address the creative side in the middle of all of that. It is an overwhelming amount of information to expect one person to get up and run with.
Thanks.
Actually, sorry, and I've got a number of things to say on that one as well. I ended up spending a bit of time with Sheridan College, actually, not with Tony, but with some of your associates in Singapore, where we were working on a workforce skills development property, which is basically the Singaporean government, if you're not familiar, basically says, we're going to do this. And everyone's like, yep, you're right, we are. And they decided they were going to adjust how they approached media education across the board. So the whole idea was, all right, as opposed to letting the colleges and universities figure it out for themselves and kind of feel their way around, let's standardize everything. This is very kind of rigorous approach to, all right, if you're in your first year, what do you need to know your second year, your third year, your fourth year? And they encourage universities and colleges then to support people in that process through their career. So we tend to look at college and university as a 4-year, you're done. Sorry, sound effects. Fill the gap for me. Again, a lot of coffee today. And I have the fortune of being able to work with universities and colleges, or at least colleges plus industry, and I can kind of see across both sides of the fence, where we look at university as your education and go, it's 4 years and I'm done, and if I go back for more education, it's for a master's, or it's for a postgraduate, or it's for something else. And there's a handoff between the universities to the industry. And I've sat in industry panels where industry goes, students aren't where we need them to be to hire. That's fair assessment. Of course, you're right. 3 years or 4 years, you can't really teach everything you need. And then the college is saying, well, you need to accept who we have. So it's almost like we're looking at this 4-year or 3-year window thinking that's it. Whereas I personally think, what we did end up seeing in Singapore was industry came very much into the classroom for the first 3 to 4 years. Provided context, provided opportunity for people to learn, provided that kind of foundational piece, and was under the expectation that when we get someone as a graduate, they're not done and ready to go. They still need a lot of work, so we need to nurture them. But then the colleges turned around and said, we're not going to finish at 4 years. Once they've got into industry, let's support them as they're going through. Let's provide structure and framework so that they can actually keep learning. So it's much more collaborative. We do have a good collaborative system here, but I get to sit in a festival and look at both sides and go, really, we could do more, actually. And I think we are leaning towards that, especially because, and here's my little soapbox to stand on. I don't know why I did that.
You can stand.
I am standing. I'm very short. We're talking about local industry. We need to think globally. A lot of the people, I ended up spending a year teaching in India, so we started an animation college in New Delhi with Centennial, and then Singapore and China, where I get to see where a lot of the work here is actually going. And it's a conversation we'll probably have later, but outsourcing is reality. People are going to send things over to India and China. So we're training students to do largely the same thing they're being trained to do in India and China, except at the end of the day, they're willing to do it for a remarkably lower amount of money. So what can we do to be competitive globally? And it's not students who need to be competitive, it's the industry and the ecosystem that we exist in. So colleges need to be more competitive. Industry needs to be more competitive. Artists truly need to be more competitive. And I do come from a commercial arts background, so I'm not as much of a fine artist, but I believe even fine artists need to understand, how do I be competitive? So this is my way of tying it back to my first thought. Tony, Mark, Peter, when you're talking, and Philippe, when you're talking about in the classroom, I think there's a missing ingredient to how we train students, which is entrepreneurship, innovation, I'm thinking of enrolling in OCAD for the strategic foresight program, because like to me that's golden. This is the sort of thinking that our graduates need to have, so that if I'm coming out with a good idea, I don't have to wait 40 years to make it. Maybe I can afford to make it with my own money. I don't have to rely on NFB. Grateful we have it, but only so many people can enroll.
Only so many people can.
So how do I learn how to create my idea and then get it out to market in a way that I can afford, get distribution, and maybe even make some money off of it? It's not an easy mix, but it's something that can be taught. It's taught in other programs. Durham is a great example, the gaming and business program, where students, in case you're wondering, they enroll in the gaming program, they also get entrepreneurship on the side. So they learn how to make a viable product in their program. The same could be said for arts. We could do that sort of training as well. And they're not going to walk out 3 years and go, I have an MBA and an NFA, but at least they've got the groundwork to be able to start looking to their options beyond just, I need to get a studio job or else I'm not going to do anything. And one last thought, I did end up doing some work with the OMDC through Sheridan, which shows that we have a massive attrition problem of talent in Toronto and Ontario.
What's attrition?
What's attrition?
Yes.
We're losing talent from our industry at a very rapid pace. So
Where's it going, Ben?
What's that?
Where's it going, to the States?
No, they're not even participating in the industry anymore to some degree. Some people are just saying, I can't hack it.
And what point's it
They
at?
leave.
Is it at what point? 20 years in?
5 years just seems to be the trend.
5 years.
5 years. This is what I actually teach business for artists up at Seneca. That's what I call it, at least. I'm not sure that's the program name. I tell people, if you get past the 5-year hump, you've dramatically narrowed the field of competition for yourself, because that's when everything really kind of starts making new, right? So what you need to do is give colleges, universities, and then for that matter, people need tools to be able to get through that 5 years. Ideally, we don't want to see 80% of our people leave in general, because we've got a really good opportunity. I'm sure Heather and Frank can speak to this about, we need IP. If we're going to be creative and competitive globally, studios and people such as yourselves need to be creating IP. You can't be just doing service work, because service work will go the cheapest dollar. You need to create property.
If I can add to that, and I know that you've got the study, which is great, I'd love to see what happens to the pick of the crop, because I know that a lot of the pick of the crop gets brought to Los Angeles.
Sure.
So these are people that could be IP creators, that have great auteur brains, that have that sort of inventive artist spark, where they can be illustrators and they could be sculptors as quickly as they could be animators. They just have that sort of creative wherewithal to create new innovative stuff, and they get picked off and get sort of plucked somewhere with a lot of money in Los Angeles to work on somebody's big project. And so we lose some of the people that could actually generate new projects for ourselves to work on. So we end up being more beholden to this sort of industry, Hollywood-driven industrial production of animation. So I think I'd love to see how that works out, because that's the goal. Right?
Let's run, and I really want to ask you something on that, because your specific project you made me aware of, and Frank, when we talked about it in Ireland, there's these other countries that have managed, and here in Canada, if you go to a market, for example, and you guys have all been there, you see the Quebec stand and the Nova Scotia stand, and it's very fragmented as a country. And you go to Ireland, and it's like here's a Guinness, and then you go to Spain, with the exception of Barcelona. But even in France, where it's all kind of cut up, they're very competitive. When they come together, the country sells itself as a brand. And if you're going to go to France, they have a real style there, and they've got a style in Korea, and there's K-pop, and this is the competition. I totally agree with you, Ben. We, as a country, are in competition amongst ourselves.
Too much.
All right, too much. And again, it was, maybe I'm from Quebec, it's the same thing, and maybe that's a little bit of a different beast there. But Quebec is suffering right now because their traditional ally for 2 decades is gone. With the CNC with France. France is going, we're on our own, we're working with Hollywood, like with the French accent. And so maybe this conversation is, partly what Ben you're saying, and is there some form of bringing it together? But because of the tax credit system in this country, Halifax has 15 point whatever it is, and Ontario has this, and you've got Vancouver. To me, and I'm going to say this, maybe we're going to shut the cameras off because I'm from Montreal, but this is and should be the most vital and vibrant commercial sector of animation in this country. I'm saying that here in Toronto, I mean with your hockey team and we whatever.
But it's just a fact, and Vancouver should be there because you've got the best schools, you've got the best talent, and now you're saying that there's attrition. So we got a problem, do we not?
But we've also got the best studios. We have, studios like Frank. This is an amazing studio. You do great work.
Well, it's hard work to run a studio in
it's
Toronto,
hard
and
work
it's
to
hard
run
work
a
for everybody
studio.
running good studios, and it's really difficult to make a business out of it and to try to export so that you can
But
actually
also
make a
to
viable
recognize
business
the
out of it.
talent
Which
at the same
trickles,
time.
And
trickles
talent.
back to schools, because if you haven't got the business going, if you aren't buying,
As good as the people you can get. Yeah.
That's right. And it could they, if they're out of school, like there's no separation from I'm just fresh in school, I've been at it for 10 years. If it's good, it's good, and that's what you need.
Yeah.
So,
But I agree with, and I wanted to, Ben, you basically took the words out of my mouth, which is, that I think that the Singapore model is the model, and that's why we're all here. I think that we're all here because we're here to talk about, it's not just emerging talent, but collaboration around a network of, what's it called, a safety net around that emerging talent to help them with those projects. I mean, we want to collaborate. That's why we're here. We want to collaborate not just with the NFB, but of course with them, but with TAAFI and with the schools and with other studios, and that's why we're all at the same table. And that is the model to support the students beyond school, support that talent. So it isn't 10 or 25 years later that your project gets made. And we're not losing, like what is the percentage of that top talent, that creme de la creme, that we do lose, and we do lose our voice then, our Canadian voice in that. And it is a global industry. And we are, by the way, recognized around the world. You can disagree with me because you probably know as much as I do about it. But we are recognized around the world as an animation country.
Yes.
And we're certainly recognized around the world as a country that created a lot of the infrastructure around animation factory, series and feature.
I think what I would say to that is that absolutely, even the numbers say it, the Youth Media Alliance out of Montreal, I think, did a little study and said that after the US and the UK, Canada's number 3. So we're punching way above our weight in terms of the size of the country and what we can produce. We're nipping at the UK in terms of probably beyond it now. So we produce a lot of animation. It's not always the best. So we produce volume maybe maybe our quality sometimes suffers. So what we have to maybe realign ourselves is to produce maybe a little bit less and make it really successful and really great, because volume just keeps us busy. It keeps us working. But it's not enough to just, as you notice, keep working, because 5 years later, a new batch of students and a new talent is being replaced, again, because of the price pressure on keeping costs down. So what we have to do is we have to hone our talent a little bit more and keep them in the industry and not lose like I said, the pick of the crop.
And that's the key point.
So that's what Hudeki is really trying
Or
to
is
do.
there a whole different way of looking at it, which is, we keep talking around the same model. Remember being in Alabama, we did the first feature film, the first thing they did, and watch it here. Here we are being really creative, making a brand new special Canadian film that killed the studio. And thank God for a 20-minute workout. Alabama was safe. But that's another story.
No?
Yes, the Care Bears do.
No, Care Bears.
You brought up a great point.
It was 20 minutes workout in those girls.
It's a whole new, there's a whole, a new model, new way of looking at it, and yeah, thank you. Yes, we need to be more, make our students more aware that this is a business, and that you are a business, you are a company, as well. It's called show business for a reason. But if you say it's number 3, and yet you have a good 5 years. I used to say to students, if you get really good at something, you can have the best 10 years of your life, because then it's going to get nasty. So what is the next, then?
Well, so it's there, right? It's up to it's back at you guys.
Well,
people do rally around great, projects. People will rally around great ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with
The issue has always been, I think,
we need a conch.
So what is the great, what is the next, target to aim for? What is the?
Well, Tony,
I just want to make a point. I mean, I remember when I got into the industry, and these two were already there. Nelvana, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, kind of. I was with Nelvana myself for about, 12 years or so, I think, 15 years. I remember, there was for the most part, we didn't have great, big, huge projects like, we made our own movies. We had some movies. We had the Care Bear movies, The Bar. No, I think we did a Rupert movie, or something, I can't remember that. But we didn't have great projects, like Frank is saying. You're not going to get great talent, wanting to stay here and work in this factory, pumping out animation. It'll work for 2 or 3 years when they get out of school, because they're excited about making a living and getting paid for drawing.
If they find
But
a
after a
job.
while, it's kind of like, this just isn't cutting it anymore. You need great projects. Now it's starting to come in. I think I hear through the grapevine we're getting some movies in town. We're getting some, so I think you're going to be able to retain more animators and more people with talent. It used to be that our animators were posers. What posers were is basically you would pose out a piece of what that animation might actually end up, key poses and stuff like that, so we could guarantee a better product. But we didn't, correct me guys, fill me in, but we had a posing department. We didn't have an animation department in Nelvana for the longest time. Because we didn't have the actual work to animate it here because we couldn't afford it here. I guess that was the model, and that still is in the case.
Yeah, I think that studios, in my experience, and I agree with everything that everybody has said, including what you just said, Tony, but in my experience, I really think it's going to be a little bit project-driven. Even to a certain extent, from a series perspective, it's going to be project-driven, where it's animated, how it's animated, and all of that. I just want to keep going back, and forgive me if I'm the odd man out, so to speak, here on this panel. But aren't we here because we're trying to find a way to collaborate around this emerging talent anyway? Isn't that, as opposed to, we now know and have identified what those issues are, but you and I, when we met, Roddy, talked about finding ways for the NFB to actually, and I'm paraphrasing here, but to actually come into studios so that you do have more of a presence in Ontario, more of a presence in Alberta or wherever, as opposed to having to set up your own sort of satellite facility, using studios as satellite facilities.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I thought we talked about that, and that was part of what we could talk about around emerging talent.
That's definitely
And
not
that's
what-
what-
So
You
this
want-
is-
Yep, you want to go ahead?
Okay.
First, and then we'll go.
So this is happening, and this is maybe where we bring in how we're working together. First of all, just to back up a second, I think, and thank you for bringing us back to this point, because I think part of what we have to do is make sure that this conversation is relevant to this audience, okay?
Yeah.
Because having, as an administrator who works in a large public institution, I can tell you, if we want to, we can spend all night talking about the cumbersome public administration in this country of cultural industries, and it will get more and more interesting the more and more we have a beer in our hand. But that's not necessarily going to help the students who are in this audience right now thinking about how am I going to try to be successful at what it is that I'm doing. That's a different subject. So the thing is that I'm going to say that every college, every university, every private institution that trains in cultural industries today, that we can no longer make the excuse that we don't know how to do what we say we need to do. And what I mean by that is that we all know we have to work with industry. The question is, do we? We all know we have to collaborate. The question is, do we? This is where a lot of the challenges currently exist within the post-secondary system, because we don't need any more studies to tell us how to actually increase student graduate success, how to actually contribute to the economic development of these industries. We know. The challenge now is making change. It's making change around how do we break down barriers, how do we enable what it is that we each as individual institutions do well, and allow that diversity to contribute to overall health and growth of these companies and this economy. And so to that point, one of the things that we started doing at Seneca, this was back in 2000, we started doing this in 2003, was we started working with the National Film Board and a company called Copperheart on a little film called Ryan, which was done by a director named Chris Landreth that went on to win the Academy Award in 2005 for Best Animated Short. That production was entirely produced on our campus in terms of the animation. There was a very rich relationship that was begun between the NFB and Seneca, and I know that that's not an exclusive thing, that there's always room for more institutions to get involved in that kind of model. We're now on our 4th production. One of them was a documentary done here in Toronto, but we're now on our 4th production under that model. And the model works like this. We have students who are interested in working on independent films, but they are not quite ready yet to think of themselves as directors. So they want to work under a really well-known director who knows his stuff to actually learn in a kind of mentorship relationship how to actually develop that skill. We provide the facilities, we provide faculty, because this is still a training experience for those students. And those faculty are essentially working over the shoulder with those students as opposed to in a lecture setting talking about what to do. In this case, in the latest case, we actually are working with the National Film Board, and this is what Roddy was referring to earlier, where some of our students are actually in Montreal. We're in Montreal, they're back now. In Montreal, working in the NFB office. The thing that connects them is a high bandwidth network called Canary, where they trade files back and forth, and they work and they collaborate virtually. This mirrors exactly what the industry is doing right now. So therefore, we have to mirror it as educational institutions, which takes us out of our silos and puts us more in a collaboration network. The commercial partner comes in as a key resource to remind us of why we're doing this in the first place. And you put those ingredients together and you have what I think is a real testing ground for success. And of course, the students that work on these films go on to doing, amazing things after they graduate. So that's just one example. And there are other examples that, we could all talk about.
We'd like to replicate that. We're talking to you.
Yeah, I've often thought, well, we haven't done more of that.
Well,
But I think I know, I kind of have an answer, and we have a very strict curriculum that is very difficult to break away from. And the only thing that we do is we do have a co-op program, which does allow our students after third year to be in a company for 400 hours, which is quite a bit of time during the summer. And if they make a good impression, they usually come back and they would like them to recruit them in fourth year to full time. So that's a great experience, and we prepare them to do that well by putting them in a group project in third year. So they go through third year in a group project, so they're able to learn how to communicate, work as a team, be nice, and then hopefully they go in and make a great co-op experience. And I totally agree with Mark, and we've spoken on various cases about different things. I find though that it's great to get them involved in everything, but if there's so much creative juice in this room, and for that matter, in any classroom, in both OCAD and Seneca, how do they really apply that after they're gone? I mean, what is that follow-up that Ben is talking about that's happening in Singapore? I mean, what is that protocol? If I go out and I have this plan and it has 3 or 4 different options for me to implement some type of plan, for me to generate an idea that I can make a film happen, and it's clear to me, there's this organization, this, and this, and I can do those steps, right? Who's going to do that research that's going to prepare that manual that can then be given to all our students? Resources, grants, NFB, these projects, that project, go overseas, international projects, innovative broadcasting,
It's the
which is.
responsibility of the school to understand the business end and to teach the business end to the students. 'Cause
I totally agree. It may be, but the problem is it's not really happening. For us, for example, we're overbooked with trying to teach them, as we just agreed, that trying to teach them everything about 2D and 3D animation in our case in 4 years, plus they have to take liberal courses, they have to take all these things, plus they have to do, it's just kind of impossible. So we don't do an awful lot of, we have in fourth year, we have a lot of people coming in and talking about, we had somebody coming in yesterday and talking about business a little bit. It wasn't one-time lecture, and now they're expected to go out, and now they've got 3 other courses, and 2 of them are essays that they don't like to read. So they're totally into so they forgot about that lecture. It's the follow-up, it's the blueprint, it's the manual that they graduate with. We all forget things. So who's going to provide that? It is our job. I do believe it is the institutions. We're the ones supposed to do the research. The problem is, I'll admit it, with Sheridan, we don't do applied research as we're supposed to. One of the things that we should definitely do, and I'm trying now that I'm full-time, is do that. Exactly, provide or do some research around, okay, so let's provide this manual for students when they graduate, talking to people like, Ben and other people that, and reverse engineer it so some of that information is taught, and then they have a follow-up.
Could I ask Ben something, and because I want to open it up a bit to you guys too.
Yeah.
Is this conversation now something that you guys can start to take into your associations and continue to talk to? Because if it is, it's something that definitely, like, I'm on the track, I can still do it. And, further to what Heather is saying, I think what we've been doing, Mark, is a great model that I'm encouraging my colleagues to say, hey, let's look at this, and how can we work around that model? Go ahead.
Just to follow up. Yeah, I think one thing that I think would be helpful as we sort of take this conversation into the future is, and it's something we talked a bit about in our earlier meetings, is to have a forum where we can, like, our emerging talent from all our different schools can really, like a showcase, I guess.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that would be something helpful for industry to see sort of all the emerging talent from Toronto, Ontario, or Canada, sort of in one room.
I think it would be great. I don't have time to, there's people in animation are going into so many industries right now, and they're, I've lost track of keeping track of all these various industries. We had a couple of students that we brought on and sort of developed as directors, and one went to the Hot House, and one went on to indie games. And so we have people coming from animation. Animation applies to so many things now. And what we don't have is people that are multidisciplinary like yourself and others who do many things, not just animation. We don't have a forum for them to showcase their talents as they might relate to animation. So that forum would be enormously helpful for the industry to see what everyone's doing. Ben?
Peter? Ben, Peter?
I would say we do have a forum, although it's very nascent, which is TAAFI,
Yes.
which is why we created TAAFI, partly because we see this conversation, like Ontario is super fragmented, Canada's super fragmented. We're not trying to solve all these problems, but there's an opportunity to come together. We're TAAFI for a reason. We're not about films, we're about the animation arts. How can you apply it, where can it go? We actually just did, I also sit on a board of an organization called CASO, which is a Computer Animation Studios of Ontario, which is largely, and Frank is a member of, it's largely a studio owner-driven association traditionally, or at least historically, and is now moving towards a larger kind of community-organized focus, as TAAFI was created to support the community. These conversations need to happen, and we need to bring everyone together under, I keep calling it that big circus tent, to say, like, let's chat, let's interact. We're pitching right now, I'm sure some of you are familiar with something called CTN Expo, which is a Cartoon Talent Network, which is out in Burbank. There's a model there that works really well, which is artists get together and showcase what they're doing, and studios get to come and talk to them, and then you have forums around that. And we're looking at exploring that very same model here in Toronto for next year in May. So ideally having a job fair / animation or talent forum where people can show their work, they can talk about things, they can see what's going on. With the hope that, this is part of our mandate, to expose fine artists, animators, interactive designers, multimedia designers to other opportunities to see where things can go.
So Ben, if these guys here are interested, they should look up TAAFI, they should look up CASO.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and we'll be announcing more details because this is still early stages, but we're still announcing how that's going to work.
I think I'd like to at least hear from you guys. Now, we've been blabbering on like a whole bunch, so if any of you have a question, if not, I'm going to pick somebody out. I'm going to make you ask a question. So, who's got something to hear? Anybody here? Anything? Pete, want to jump in? But it's your future. Yes.
What is the market for hand-drawn animators right now? As you all know.
We'd like them to be preferably flesh and body animators. It's going to be a little more effective.
You get my question?
People are drawing, they're drawing on digital tablets, Cintiqs, and their sketchbooks and their tablets. So people are drawing ideas in the subway, in meetings. The production art is being done digitally, generally, in our experience.
But it's still to a
Important.
certain extent, a drawn form.
Yes. Yes.
Classical, traditional animation on paper. I think there's one feature being made right now in Europe, or maybe two. So
Sure, it's expensive.
It's a luxury.
It's expensive and it's a luxury. I just want to add one thing, or say one thing. I agree 100% with what Ben is saying and the model and all of that, because I think that there's been a huge onus put on producers within the industry to, frankly, support emerging talent and find ways to do that. And I think working with the schools, working with the NFB, working with TAAFI, working with all these organizations, TAAFI, for example, creating that kind of event, like a CTN or a job fair, supports the producers, and it sort of takes us out of our silo, our producer silo, where we're frankly at huge risk financially all the time with every project, and kind of on our own in that way.
Well, literally, it takes a lot of time to go looking for talent, scouring websites and blogs, which we all do in our spare time, which we don't have. So if we had a forum, if we had a place where people, it really comes from the artist. If the artist has something to show, you have Toronto Arts Fair at the outdoor art show. It's similar. This is what I got. You have a table, $25, whatever. Sorry, it's not the pricing establishment, but it'll be something. Sorry, $400.
Yeah, sorry.
It'll be a table you establish and say, "This is what I do," and it's a screen, it's a tablet, it's whatever. It's a chance for people in the industry who are looking for talent and looking for opportunities to work with the talent to go around and see what you're doing. We go to all the schools' open houses, but even that, there's like 5 or 6 schools spread across all in June. I mean, what if I'm busy in production in June? I can miss some of the open houses. So, I think it's a great idea, Beth, and I really support you in we can
Actually,
pull that.
Ben, sorry.
There's one thing, it's all I'm hearing something all sort of come here, and it would definitely involve everybody here. And then we're talking about a forum, we're talking about an opportunity. If I had the opportunity to make the perfect wish system, I would say, if you look at a social network like Facebook, and only just for students of animation and studios and producers, and I know that the most effective time of teaching is as you get toward the end, and it's really one-on-one focused. And I have time to really get to know the person there and where their strength is, where their wishes and desires are, where their creativity lies. And like, wow, here is where I found the thing, not the class, not the, it is this wonderful individual. Now, I would think, I would love if that person could sit with Frank for a while. I would love if that person, could meet Dave and watch him model or something. What a wonderful thing. What about that possibility of opening up or creating a place where students have that one-on-one time, like the animation mentor, only for the Canadian community, only,
Can I jump in, Peter?
Yeah.
We talked about this in Ottawa, right? And one of the things CTN does really poorly is they have no social network. So they got the Marrakesh figured out. They got the market where people come with their arts. And LA's got a great indie animation outsider artists community. So there's guys who do graffiti artists and outsider artists like Juxtapose magazine, things like that kind of cross over with the animation world. They do some gallery shows and they do some conceptual art for the studios. We have a bit of that, maybe not as developed in Toronto. But so they have a larger industry, so I guess those artists have enough cash to plunk down on a table and sit in a room. I've never been to CTN, but I heard it's really great. But in Canada, we have to hire Canadians, like our tax would have for production. It's useless to us to go to LA and look at great talent going, great, I can't hire any of you guys. So the thought was to do a north by northwest to their south by southeast and make it focused around Canadians. But what they're missing is the social network. They're missing the LinkedIn or whatever of animation arts, where we can go look at all that and see people's work outside of that one time of the year, face-to-face contact thing.
They're doing better with that though, because
the better organization and accessible.
For the schools as well.
The schools presenting
Well,
their
the schools can
portfolios
have a
online
window as well.
in a more cohesive way. Because frankly, the schools and the way they're presenting portfolios, we as producers find it a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, 200 books, I'm sure.
Yeah, please. We've got it.
Because we're gonna run out of time. We got somebody back there. Let's get some more.
Yeah, I just have a question as to where the problem really lies. And I've always thought when it comes to independent film that has to do with support from distribution. If we had a rule that at any time a theater is showing a feature film, that they have to show a 4-minute film that was made in Canada beforehand in any Canadian theater, people would actually see them, and those great little films become the creators of those become the creators of the feature films 5 years down the road.
It's a great idea.
That's just smart.
It's a great idea. TV has that requirement, CanCon requirement. The theaters don't. And so the theaters are basically booked up by American distributors for years. So that's why, if you wonder why Canadian film hasn't taken off, Canadian animated film hasn't taken off, that's exactly why.
And
you make that film, there's nowhere you can
The irony-
But you still, to get your
Quebec
tax
is-
boost, you need that one screening.
Yes.
So it's a great idea because it gives you one screening, which contributes to your financing.
It
to
just
your
starts
tax
the
It's
cycle.
the circle.
It's a great idea. Who do
The
you propose it to?
irony in Quebec is Dimanche, which was nominated for an Oscar last year, they went, the Quebec theaters went, trampling right up to the NFB and said, we want your film to, as an opening. And it was the same thing, about 2 or 3. So it's more in that culture of Quebec. So the problem there is really the exhibitors are so tied in with Canada is considered part of the North American box office. Just open up Roddy, look in the back, you don't see a distinction. Canada is not anywhere there. They're considered part of the box office.
You have to actually pay the Canadian results separately.
Yeah.
But just to follow up on that, great idea. My question would be, with many things that we discuss even at the institutional level, how do we make it happen? Who do you talk to? We're just saying, we're agreeing with you. We don't even, I don't know how to do that. I don't even know who
It's
to go to.
legislation, it's the government,
So-
it's legislation.
Maybe the answer is that it can happen.
Yeah, it's
CRTC.
Telefilm,
Telefilm,
CRTC,
CRTC.
CAFCO, and it's also the Exhibitors Association.
Start a Facebook page. I mean, whatever. I don't know how you get that stuff going, but I've talked about that many times. Why does it not exist, and who's going to get it going? It's hard for us in the industry to do that because we're stakeholders.
So we're
but
dump that on you guys, in other words.
Get out
You
there,
guys,
make noise.
and then let us know, and we can spread the word around.
I think
noise.
Frank had just maybe had a really good point that you hopefully heard, which is we're stakeholders. As stakeholders, sometimes it's hard for us to be the ones making the noise. We don't want to annoy the CRTC. We want to be the ones doing that, or Telefilm, or CAFCO, or UMDC, or our funding bodies. It's different for you guys. You're coming from a different spot in the industry.
And for institutions, you're making a very good point, I'm sorry. But you make a great point. Well, both you guys, I think, and that's what I'm beginning to realize, that as academics, we can write about these things. I don't have to worry about what they say. I'm part of a union now. I'm gonna get paid anyway, right? So that's a great point, because I really do believe that we should do more of that as academics and write about these things and do the research, because we're supposed to have time for it.
But I think we're looking at a generational shift too, where there's a certain sense of activism out, and your generation says, go do that. That would be really good.
And
I
you
saw
have
another
platforms
hand
to do
switching.
it.
I want to hear from. We got one over here, and I'll go over there first, then Laing with the red scarf, and then we'll go over there. So go ahead. But let's keep it quick. Let's get some interaction.
You were talking about the whole Canadian citizen, Ontario resident policy of hiring. I'm not Canadian, but I graduated from Sheridan, so I spent 5 years studying in Canada, paying tuition and paying taxes, whatever it took. And now I'm having trouble, although the industry is quite slow right now, to find jobs because I'm not a resident.
Are you a landed immigrant or resident?
No,
You're on a student
You
visa
don't
at this
have your
stage, right?
Ontario residency?
no, I'm on a work visa,
Work visa.
so I can work, but I'm not a resident. So
That's why you're having trouble, because a large portion of our funding for any project we do, we have to consider our financing. A large portion of that funding comes from our tax credits. Our tax credits are also predicated on your citizenship and your residency.
But can I ask you what your country of origin is?
India?
India. So what you're going to find is a Canadian company with a co-production in
We
India.
don't,
We'd
we
love
don't,
to have
we
you
don't have a
visit.
There's no
co-production.
co-production treaty.
There's no treaty with India.
But I can tell you that there might be a neat studio that we have in Toronto in the next couple of years.
Yeah, there's studios out of Ottawa that have Indian connection, out of Montreal that have Indian connection.
But they're still going to be under the same, like if they're opening in Toronto regardless, they're still going to be under the same
The whole
financing.
reason they're opening in Canada is to take advantage of our tax credits, so there's still 51% obligation for Canadian.
Shouldn't it give me a better chance since I studied in Canada?
It's a good
I'm not
theory,
just
and it's
having-
the same situation as this fellow back here, and you're gonna have to take it up with CAFCO and the CRTC. As producers, we have a huge risk, and we have to finance our projects. If we don't finance them, none of you are employed. So I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I feel for you, but until if you get Ontario residency, it's a different discussion.
Real quick, because we're going to get to some more questions.
Sorry, no, I'll let you keep going. We'll talk later.
I think Lady with the Red Scarf. It sounds like a bad song from the 1900s. Christopher.
Willis and Gromit. I'm wondering what the market is like for claymation. So this is a threefold question. What is the market like for claymation? What does a person do when they have an idea, but they actually need a lot of other individuals to help them put that idea together? And then what is the possibility for funding sources for someone who doesn't belong to the school but might want to play out, so I'm not a student here, but I'm just taking part in this event, if there was an opportunity to actually play out a script in a school assignment where it evolves, so a lot of the residuals go to the school for recognition, go to the individual submitting the concept or writing the script, and then to the students involved in the creation of the actual project.
We should unpack that maybe one at a time. So let's start with the claymation, which is more effective. Does anybody make commercial claymation anymore?
Yeah, sure.
Still? I mean, is this for feature or series work?
We teach, we have,
But outside of
but we
teaching,
don't,
commercial applications still,
Cup of coffee.
cup of coffee still.
It's huge, yeah, absolutely.
Art is still doing it?
Yeah,
A
art is.
little bit.
A little?
You know, and bottom line is,
It's not
it's the
bad.
same problem. You've got to get a studio on board and/or a school on board. If you come to us with a school on board, frankly, we're going to be a little more interested because we're approached all the time for projects and for students, and, you know, that's my perspective. And it's about the collaboration.
Yeah, and speaking from the school perspective, I would say the same thing as Heather, which is that if you got a studio interested, the schools would be more interested. So maybe there's sort of a network that happens that actually, you know, collectively we talk about these ideas to see. what
There
might
is one
actually
other
be
option, sorry.
Oh, sure. Just to add to this is I love the sort of the Seneca Ryan model. I think that's a brilliant way of enmeshing industry and academia, and I think I'd love to get something started like that at OCAD too. But I think in regards to claymation, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel that good character, good story is timeless. I think the medium doesn't really matter.
The medium matters as far as finance, like how much it costs. We opened Paranorman with Leica a couple months ago, and I was talking to the directors, and it's like, how often do you see a full stop motion release what they made? Well, this year we have 3 Pirates, that Paranorman, and then Frankenstein. I think that's a rarity on a feature level because the costs are high. So it's like vinyl. Vinyl's great. It sounds awesome, but no one really makes vinyl stuff anymore because it's just cost. Everything else. You still go digital. So I think that's the big one. What's that? And so the second part was going about financing it?
Yes.
Can I just jump in for a second on this, because this is probably not, you got experts over here who will find out really good ways to finance stuff, but there's people who are basically self-financing. I'm not going to throw Kickstarter as the answer, because I actually think it's not. Indiegogo and Kickstarter are a piece of the larger puzzle when it comes to financing yourself independently. But you know, we started TAAFI basically asking for a lot of help. And it's a festival, it's not a show, but there's a lot of people who look at that and go, who can I bring together to at least get something out the door? And not look at the final piece, but maybe as like what they might call an interactive, the minimum viable product. The smallest piece that gets an idea up and going. So then I can go to Yowza and go, here's the idea, why don't we get on board and go to Seneca and talk about getting it made there. So being creative about your financing at the independent level might be worth exploring. But looking at something like Kickstarter or crowdfunding as a stage in there to maybe help it go, or think about it more from a product standpoint. That makes something that I can sell on the iPad App Store. You never know. There could be interesting ideas.
And be ready to come to us. To have your project ready. Don't come to us. Frankly, I've seen everything from one piece of paper to a really well-developed property. I'm at the point in my life now that I just want to see that well-developed property. The one page is great if the spark is there, and in fact, the one we showed you started as one page, but that's a lot of work for us to put into a project. And we want to know that you have that creative vision and that commitment to that property as well.
One of the things that I've seen too that involves that really quickly is I've seen a lot of graduates who just go out and make things. They just do it. They say, you know what, and it's always attractive. When you see someone who's busy, you assume that there must be something good about what they're doing. It's because they're just doing it and they're making it. And so it's like, gee, if you're not too busy, maybe you could work on my project and, you know, and for money. So, you know, you don't know until you don't wait for somebody to say, now you have permission to do it. You just make it.
There's one simple rule for when you pitch us anything, and that is at the very basic level, write it down on a piece of paper. And that's for 2 reasons. It shows your commitment, small as that might be, because you've written it down on a piece of paper. Secondly, it protects you, and that it's your IP, because you've written it on a piece of paper. So the more you can do from there, obviously the better. So if you have a little short bit that shows what it is, or you have a couple of stills, and you have an inspiring speech, and you have a great musical track that you can sing on the ukulele, I mean, obviously your pitch goes from there to whatever you want it to be. But start with a piece of paper and a drawing and something written down. And otherwise we won't even consider it. We don't like conversation.
I'll give you a great example along that. We're doing a film with Andrea Dorfman from Halifax. She did a film called Flawed for the NFB, which has just been great, and she has a new one coming out, but she's best known for a video that she animated over called How to Be Alone. And that's how come we're making films with her, because she's got like over 7 million hits on YouTube. So we don't have anything at the NFB with 7 million hits on YouTube, you know? So, and that's a big issue for me as a mayor. So, but I think Peter's absolutely right. It's kind of like be Nike, just do it, you know, get out there, make mistakes, put the stuff out. By doing it, you're going to learn better. And John Lasseter just did it, you know, and so did Norman McLaren and all great filmmakers.
If I could just, a quick note for that, I see a lot of artists falling into this trap of making sure it's perfect before you get out the door, which is, it's a flaw, because I've met a lot of people who just got stuff out, and it's called iterative prototyping. You get it out, hear what everyone's saying, fix it. So build, measure, learn. And if you go into app development, that's what you're constantly doing, just getting out the door. So the same thing, just get something out there, test it, figure it out, come back, and eventually you get traction.
Here's what Lasseter says about making films, okay? Release dates. He says, okay, finishing films. We never finish a film at Pixar, we just have a release date. Okay, so even now, okay, they never finish the film. I saw a question back there. Yeah.
Sorry, are there any opportunities for like challenges, like for example, you'll be given a specific subject or like criteria to make something
like a contest?
Some challenge or competition for like given a subject, make like so that we can be like have some installation ideas and then like present.
Yeah, I like that idea. You know, they do it with music, Polaris Song Contest, things like that. And then I think it's kind of absent.
Well, I'll throw in, I'm not sure as far as pitching for series, but I'll put a plug in for the Toronto Animated Image Society. For anybody who's interested in animation, you should plug into anything like that. The Toronto Animated Image Society has workshops, has nights where they do, they all get together, whoever's there at the time, and they'll do a 24-hour film, or they'll teach each other, they'll do all kinds of stuff. And that's really where you want to be. You want to be around like-minded people that are exploring the art form, that are exploring the medium from what it can do. Anything from scratch on film to claymation to anything that moves. So it's a great organization. And there are other organizations like that, smaller, larger. TAAFI?
Yeah, we're actually about to say we're doing
thinking about doing something exactly like that. I guess discussing it right now.
But it's once a year. Still, it's an idea of like a 5 to 10 second bumper. We may open it further. So things like that will exist. I think TAAFI is a great example of. There's an organization that already does exist that actually really supports this community at a level that I think a lot of people. It's probably
whatever level you're at.
Recognize up here right now.
Yeah, just a little note on that. You were thinking about how you finance it. We do have a co-op program, as I was mentioning, at Sheridan. What is possible, though you have to be organized, right? The way we work it is that companies like Frank, and he's taking in interns, I think, right? You always have a couple of spots. Yeah, and he's hired lots of them, so there you go. So, but you can design a project. You can design a plan for that project. You can have a schedule. You have to look like you're professional. You have to want to do it. And you can actually advertise that job in our co-op program. And what you have access to looking at all the third-year portfolios. We have a website where you can look at their portfolios. You can designate which jobs you were looking for. So in your case, it's probably be a conceptual artist, right? Somebody who's going to help you design, possibly anything from the design to the storyboarding. Maybe you could pick up a couple of people, but it has to be within the framework of a production, because they are supposed to be getting that kind of exposure. If it's stop motion, which is what you're saying, there aren't that many creative intern jobs for that. They may go somewhere and they may just need to do something at a company. It's going to be very attractive to them to be able to take a project and develop it and have it in their portfolio as something they've developed, right? And it could be paid or it doesn't have to be paid, but it does have to look like you know what you're doing. So you need to do some groundwork on setting up that business deck, and you can hire 2 to 3 people that can help you out, and you can have 400 hours over the summer, which is a lot of time. And if you choose the right people, you can get a really good proposal together.
Which just past 7:30, which I think is when we're supposed to do the screening, but maybe we'll do one more question, maybe? Great.
Yeah. As someone I've got a website, and I've been working with different Canadian organizations to get more info about Canadian animation online. And so it's like CanadianAnimation.com, and I've worked with Ben and TAAFI and Mark, and they're amazing in terms of getting the films out there. And I'd say that's definitely, if you're looking for Canadian films, access those resources and contact them, and feel free to contact me as well if you have a film that you want to be promoted and you want to have it out there in the Canadian animation market. Now, caveat to that is no one searches for Canadian animation. Virtually nobody goes online and is like, oh, I want to look at Canadian animation. It's unfortunate, but what I want to know is when you guys go online, have any of you gone online and searched for Canadian animation? Has anyone in this room gone on and typed in Canadian animation as a search? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So what do you guys search for when you go online to look for Canadian films? As a general question.
It's a great question. Again, yeah.
It's interesting. If you look at Vimeo.com, YouTube, and all these kind of distribution platforms online, you don't. I think a lot of people, it's kind of, there's that virality behind it. Some people tend to go there and they'll just go, oh, I saw one, and at the bottom it goes, you might like this and this. So there's places that I find animation, but it's not by searching in. I need to find Canadian animation. Like it's not a search term, I think. And Frank would probably say this. It's not about the country of origin as much as the quality of the story. And the execution of it. That's really what people are searching for. And that, I don't even know what the search terms are.
And it's not even, for me, it's not as much a search as the people I know are constantly sending me things.
Yeah.
Did you see this? Have you seen that? So it's the same as you're sharing stuff amongst you and your peers. It happens with us as well. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
That's one of the last questions.
The last question.
At the end of your travels, is there going to be any kind of white paper or anything, or what's going to happen next?
Oh, I won't write a white paper because I hate white papers. I really kind of believe in action. No, but I can do a bit of editorializing on what's going on with the National Film Board. We have our commissioners, Tom Perlmutter, really brilliant guy, and he, for the first time in the history of the NFB, the commissioner's been given a 5-year extension, and he's actually tasked me with creating a strategy for national strategy for animation in French, and I'm working with my colleague Randy Cheney in French as well. So yeah, it will take a form internally, but I think you guys know me most of it. I'm from these guys' world, so Grayden, I think we talked about that in the interview, and it'll be up on CanadianAnimation.com. Yeah, we're all about getting more animation done with more people. And that's why I kind of called this party here, and it's going to have to come, because when the word attrition, I can't stand it. So it's the guys like Ben, it's the studios here in Toronto. So I go and get on a plane, I'm going to do this all over again tomorrow in Calgary. Completely different. They don't have schools, they don't have a studio industry, yet they've got an animation, homegrown animation festival called Giraffe. They've got a Quick Draw Animation Society. These people are putting together dimes, bringing in their beer bottles, cashing them in so that they can do animation. They're doing it for the love of it. And yet, they've got Wendy Tilby and Amanda, where you're going to be doing, out of Calgary, doing amazing stuff. Cam Christensen, who's doing a big film with the NFB. So my thing, you're absolutely right. Tony, we were talking about it. Animation can be done anywhere in this country, and it should be done all across the country. So that's part of it. How are we going to propagate that more and more and more? So that's, I guess that could be the last word. Thank you. Thank you. You gotta do this again.
Yeah. Next year. May 31st, June 2nd, I'm on Tip Bell Light Box.
Thanks everyone on the panel and Roddy for coming tonight. Maybe we'll take a 10-minute bathroom break, breather, and then we'll start the screening after that.